All right, everybody. Thank you so much for coming today. We're so excited to be talking about bringing the connected worker to MedTech 4.0. We have a lot planned, and Welf, if you could just go to the next slide.
Sure.
So we have industry experts from Tulip and from Seabrook Technology Group who will be discussing MedTech 4.0 and how to bring the connected worker. First, if you want to hit the next slide, we have John Quirke, who is the Director of Connected Manufacturing with the Seabrook Technology Group. And he'll be sharing a little bit more about himself in a few minutes. And then we also have Welf Ludwig, who is from Tulip and is the Digital Manufacturing Specialist. So as I mentioned earlier, if you have any questions, feel free to throw them in the Q&A and we'll be sure to address them at the end of today's presentation. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Patrick. So welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us here in the afternoon, maybe during your lunchtime. So my name is Welf Ludwig, and yeah, I'll kind of start off here, providing a quick background on Tulip, and then we'll dive right into the presentation. For those of you that don't know us, we're obviously a software company spun out from MIT in 2014, headquartered in Boston, and yeah, providing manufacturing software to various industries. And today, also a little bit about myself, right? We'll be focusing mostly on med device manufacturing. That's also where my background is in pharmaceutical, life science, med device, and we'll cover some of the things here in a moment. I'm also joined here by John from Seabrook.
Thank you, Welf. Yeah, at Seabrook Technology Group, our main focus is providing connected manufacturing solutions for medical device and diagnostics industry. We work a little bit also with the adjacent industries like bio, pharma, and even some semiconductor. We have offices in Ireland, which is where the company originates from, but we also have people in the US on the East Coast and the West Coast, in India and in the Philippines. We are partners with Siemens. In fact, we're a reseller and a SMART certified partner in the US and in Europe. There's really only a small number of Siemens partners that have attained this certification, so we're very happy about that. But we also have partnerships with Tulip, which is what we'll be talking a little bit about today, and AWS. As Seabrook is a consulting business, of course, it's all about the people. And you can see here we have some highly competent and trained and certified people. We've been in this industry for about more than 30 years, and we specifically focus on integration, manufacturing intelligence, and EDR, EHR, device history record, of course, is an important aspect of this industry. But when you talk with Seabrook, you'll realize our main aspiration is to be a leading manufacturing software as a service provider to this industry. That's where we're focused. So a little bit then about myself before I hand back to Welf. My title again is that of Director of Connected Manufacturing at Seabrook. I'm based on the US West Coast here in Portland, Oregon. I've also worked pretty much all of my career in the life science industry, initially as engineer, application development work and project management, and moved on to product management, which is why I came to the US, which was about 15 years ago, and then transitioned into sales and business development management, and more recently, kind of general management. So my role in Seabrook is responsibility for thought leadership around this connected manufacturing topic, and helping with what we might call our pivot towards cloud computing and software as a service, and in particular manufacturing apps, which is what we're here to discuss today. You'll hear us today talk a little bit about MedTech 4.0. Industry 4.0 is around a while, and it's the fourth industrial revolution, often referred to as the Internet of Things. MedTech 4.0 really is what the medical device and diagnostics industry are doing in this fourth industrial revolution. So just to try and calibrate a little bit on that. All right, I'll hand back to Welf to get this thing going. Thanks, Welf.
Sure. Thanks, John, for the intro. So we'll turn off our videos here so you don't have to stare at our faces here throughout the entire presentation. So let's look at our agenda, right? So we'll, throughout today, cover a number of topics, starting at, looking at kind of the state of the industry, right? So where are we at this point in time? What are some of the challenges, that we're facing? Next up, after that, we'll look at, how do we solve these challenges using, digital technologies, and in this case, specifically what we call the connected worker, right? So we'll talk about what exactly is a connected worker, what are, the technologies that enable a connected worker, what are the use cases or the problems we can solve, and then we'll look at, how do we start on this journey of digital transformation, and at the end we'll finish with some actual examples, how around what we've seen in this space and also what our partner Seabrook has seen, and then at any point throughout the presentation, feel free to ask questions. We'll address them as we go along here, and we can at the end we'll leave some time as well for the questions. This presentation is also being recorded, so we'll post this, and we'll share this on our social media afterwards too. Okay, so looking at the state of the industry, how do we get where we are today, right? So the first thing that we see, and before obviously Corona, we were traveling a lot, visiting a lot of pharma and med device companies, and paper-based manufacturing is still really prevalent, right? So a lot of companies, a lot of shop floors that we see, they're still using kind of legacy technologies. Often we see paper, we see older software systems, maybe MES systems, or other type of systems. Sometimes if somebody's a little bit more advanced, they'll be using things like maybe PDF or spreadsheets, right? So kind of digital paper or paper on glass. And there's challenges around that, right? And we'll address some of these here in a moment. At the same time, right, obviously there's a movement towards digitization, but we're still kind of, that's just starting to happen. While at the same time, we're seeing, stricter regulations, right? So FDA is starting to look more and more at, the medical device space. I work with also, some, dental labs, for example, and even they are, in the past they weren't being even considered a medical device, and now the FDA is starting to audit them as well, right? So the stricter regulations by the FDA, and then also at the same as with the European Union, they're actually releasing a new medical device regulations effective next year. It was actually supposed to come out this year in, I believe, March, but due to COVID and everything, that has been pushed back by a year, but it's coming, right? And with that, if you're still using paper-based tools or manual tools, there's going to be it's going to be difficult to manage some of these regulations. And then the last thing, right, is that we have cost pressures coming into the market, right? So we see there's been a lot of consolidation in the healthcare space. Companies are getting much larger, and that's adding pressure onto the manufacturers to become more efficient, to provide lower cost prices, and with that we need to be as efficient as possible when we're manufacturing our products. So those are kind of three big challenges. So how can the next couple of slides we'll kind of like talk about how we can address some of these using digital technologies, and specifically what we kind of call the connected worker. Before we do that, just gonna talk a little bit more about in detail about some of the challenges here, specifically around the existing tools on the shop floor, right? So the main thing that we see is really that the tools that we, on the shop floor haven't kept up with the challenge, right? So people are still using paper-based tools. They're walking around with stopwatches to do time studies. They have whiteboards to visualize information, and even maybe legacy software. And there's a lot of issues around that, and also specifically around being manual, being paper-based, right? And I mean, the first thing, obviously, it's pretty obvious. It's inefficient, right? It's expensive to have somebody just to, print out a history record or an SOP and then walk it down to the shop floor, get it approved, right? There's a lot of, inefficiencies there. Also, there's, problems around right first time, right? If you think about it, if you're following a paper-based process, the values that you're recording on your document, on your device history record, those aren't being verified in real time, right? So, oftentimes you're going to catch quality issues, they're just caught too late in the process. And that could result in you having to do a lot of rework. It can result in scrap, right? And, it just makes it less efficient, right? And those type of things we can easily eliminate using, kind of digital technologies. Another thing is data integrity. That's been a big topic by the FDA, right? They're putting more and more focus on, the fact that your data needs to be following Alcoa principles, right? Making sure, the data is, accurate. And, with obviously, again, with, some of these manual tools, that's not always the case. And then even, like simple things like we kind of call these dumb mistakes or fat finger entries, right? Where you have somebody, is just missing the date, or they put the wrong date, they forget a signature, right? Simple things like that can quickly be eliminated using, digital technologies. This kind of, it leads here to the next slide. According to, research from Excendia, they're kind of these industry analysts. They found out that according to the FDA's data, about 54% of the recalls of the last 3 years could have been prevented by the use of digital systems. That's pretty staggering if you think about it. Just by implementing digital technologies that we solved some of the challenges on the last slide. So we'll kind of look at that here and now, right? So maybe quickly to summarize the state of the industry, right? So still a lot of paper, a lot of legacy systems. We have stricter regulations coming in, and at the same time we have cost pressure. So let's look at how do we, solve these challenges using, digital technologies, and specifically what we call a connected worker here. So first, let's kind of look at what exactly is the connected worker. Connected worker, sometimes you can also call it the augmented worker, right? That term can be used interchangeably. It's essentially a worker on the shop floor or in your manufacturing environment that is essentially integrated to their environment through technologies, right? So what that means for manufacturing, right? That means you're using software, you're using, IoT or Internet of Things technologies, right? That could be simple thing like your smartphone or your tablet. It could be a barcode scanner, a printer, right? And you're working and interacting with your environment and using technology to assist you, right? So being guided through a process, having things like Pictolite, right? All these different technologies working together to augment the person or supporting the person on the shop floor. So that's the connected worker. So there's, obviously there's different types, right? So we have I think the one we just talked about is the person, working on the shop floor, right? They're the ones kind of on the front line, building or assembling, your product, and what comes to what's important to them, right? They want to be guided through the process. Again, right first time is key here, and they want to be as efficient as possible, right? Then we have on the other end of the spectrum, we have the executives, right? So the leadership, production supervisors, and for them, what's important is they want to see how's my plant performing today, right? How many units have we produced? Are we ahead? Are we behind, right? And by using these digital technologies, you can have essentially look at it on your smartphone as you're going to work, right? At any point in time, you can look up a dashboard and look at your most important KPIs to see in real time how you're performing. And then we have engineers, right? So engineers, they want to be agile, right? They want to be able to, improve the process, and they need, tools to quickly analyze, and be able to make changes to the process, right? So for them, what's important is really and kind of an agile, manufacturing platform that makes it possible for them to improve the manufacturing environment. Okay, so we looked at kind of what the connected worker is, and we just talked about the different types. So now let's look at some of the benefits, right, that you can enable by having this type of digital connected worker solution. I think I mentioned it a couple times already, but really I think especially in our industry, right, in medical device and also in the pharmaceutical space, right, we're providing here often life-saving technologies. And quality is really, of the highest, the most important thing for us, right? So enabling things like error proofing, making sure that we have really good right first time, and a good quality product is going out of the door. That's really the key in our industry, really above everything else, right? So by implementing these, digital solutions, right? So having somebody be guided through the process, for example, right? Instead of, previously on paper, you're, following maybe some work instructions, you're writing it down using a pen, right? That's really inefficient, right? With your, with these digital technologies now, think of the person, they're walking through the process, and let's say I need to scan like a part that I want to use on my, if I need to use a certain part in my process, I can scan a barcode, I verify, okay, that's the correct process. We automatically create a genealogy, we create a history. I use this part with this serial number in my process. Everything is being recorded, like the time, the person that did it, the date, right? The whole audit trail is being generated, and we're verifying that all the things in real time, right? So basically, essentially, we're guaranteeing right first time, right? We're error proofing the process. So that's really I would say probably the number one, benefit here. Often also, if you're familiar with, life science industry, right? There's kind of if you have a manual process, you require a double signature, right? So if in critical steps of your process, right? So a second verifier. And if you're using, digital tech systems that are, validated, then you can actually skip that verification signature. Right, so that's going to save you, in terms of, it's a saving in terms of headcount right there. Then the next, pretty clear benefit here is, right, so is the visibility, improved visibility into what's happening on the front lines, right? What's happening on the shop floor. So, the fact that we're, basically recording everything that's happening on the shop floor, right? That gives us the ability to also visualize it, in terms of dashboards to whoever needs to see it, right? So often, what we see is, there could be like a television screen, maybe in your operations center or somewhere on the shop floor that displays your most important KPIs. So things like first pass yield, units produced today, number of defects, all of that can be, in real time, be visualized to give you like a real time visibility into your shop floor to see if you're ahead or behind. And then you can also, have alerts, right? So if you're going below or above certain thresholds to, act on things before it really goes, into the red. Then the next thing, obviously, is the integration of your systems, right? So having a connected worker means, right, you can interact with, on the shop floor with, your app that performs your process, but in the background, there's also other systems that are, working, right? So we have usually an ERP system, we have maybe an MES system, maybe a LIMS system, training, right? So having the ability to connect all these different systems together and visualize, pull the data that's relevant essentially to the person on the shop floor so that they can make decisions, right? So as an example, right, if you're, performing maybe a consumption, right, you have a bill of material and of your parts that you need to assemble, then we can, the connected worker would use an app that pulls data from the ERP system. The ERP system would show them the quantities or the bill of material, and then they can perform a consumption against that, right? Or we can check against training, right? We can connect to a training system, right? There's all these, backend systems that can be connected. Those are some of the, key benefits, but obviously there's, a lot more. We'll share these slides also with you, but, some of the more important ones, like overall, right, safety is a big thing, being able to make better decisions in real time, being able to communicate, having, things like logbooks, simplified asset management, and, another thing, as we're, there's always we're always looking for talent, right? New talent to join our industry. So it also being able to attract a younger workforce, right? So a lot of, the Gen X's, and millennials, they're looking for, they don't want to be working with paper technologies, right? They're used to, TikTok or, their smartphone and being able to, pull things up in real time. So that's also another, benefits of bringing these technologies in. Okay, so next, let's look at some of the connected worker technologies that are out there. So there's kind of four main buckets. The first thing is, platforms. Then we have interfaces, smart sensors, and IoT devices. And then the last one is, obviously cloud and edge computing. So the first thing, in order to, bring, this connected worker to the shop floor, you need software or a platform that enables that, right? So so in this case, right, what we mean by that is it would be a solution, for example, like Tulip, right? We consider Tulip a manufacturing application platform, right? So what that means, it's a tool that for process engineers, quality engineers, that they can leverage to digitize their physical world, right, into applications. Once we have the platform in place, right, these platforms often come, obviously we have interfaces, and by interfaces we don't mean like connecting systems together, but it's really the interface, the endpoint device, right? What is somebody interacting with on the shop floor as they're working and doing their process, right? So in our world, that could mean you could be using, a smartphone, it could be a tablet, PC, or even an Apple Watch or like a smartwatch, right? So different devices that allow you that visually represent, the work instructions or the process. Then we have these, what we call smart sensors or simply IoT devices. And this is, a key part of these platforms as well, is being able to, capture data from the physical world. So this could be, things like temperature sensors or humidity sensors. It could be, brake beam sensors, barcode scanners, basically, anything that allows you to capture data from the physical world. And this is key if you want to, especially if you want to make also like legacy equipment kind of quote unquote smart, right? So we have, for example, if one of our customers is a Taza chocolate, they're like this chocolate manufacturer, and they have these really old, legacy machines, right? And they, there's no PLC running on them, or and nothing for us to connect via software. And you can leverage in those scenarios. You can use IoT devices for example, a brake beam sensor to count the number of revolutions, or to see if a machine is running, right? Or you can use a vibration sensor to see if something's vibrating. So in a sense, that allows you to make these kind of dumber or legacy pieces of equipment smart and bring them into kind of this industry 4.0 world. And then the last part here is cloud and edge computing, right? And everybody's using the cloud right now. it's really revolutionized, and also democratized, software for many, and with specifically within manufacturing, it really allows us to communicate in real time, and really also basically infinitely scale, right? Within a day we can you could essentially digitize or roll out a platform across all of your facilities. So we talked about the state of the industry, right? Just to quickly summarize, right? We're still operating on paper, where there's a lot more regulations coming in, there's cost pressure, and we talked about how we can use the connected worker to solve some of these issues, right? Specifically around solving right first time, improving quality. So I'll hand it over now to John from Seabrook, who's going to talk about more specifically how you can kind of embark on that digital transformation journey.
That's great. Thank you, Welf. And just before I do continue, please do remember you can submit questions in that box on your screen. And we will have a session at the end where we'll try and address those. So yeah, just standing back a little bit and looking at the business drivers side of things here. People like Gardner in their reports, they talk about the digital transformation, and they actually talk about it as being a digital business transformation. And the significance of having that type of business transformation approach to it. Why are we doing this? What does this technology mean for us? Sometimes it actually means transforming the business model that they use to do their business because of this technology and this journey. The journey typically begins with a digital maturity assessment of the business as it is today, and then having got that, then looking to the future to say, where do they want to be? We use this graphic here, and we encourage and we help our customers to build their own vision of that journey for themselves, and even to create a new business model. What you're seeing here is on the horizontal axis is, companies on the left-hand side, perhaps with, the beginning of the journey where they have connected things, and, even parts of the organization like the IT organization and the OT part of the organization coming together and beginning to get synergies, and moving towards the middle of this axis, where you're visualizing the business, having insights and understanding into the business, and moving towards the right-hand side of this would be businesses that have indeed deployed, enterprise software that may even be moving towards autonomous actions, meaning that product before it goes out of spec, the systems are able to take corrective actions, of course notify the operations, but take the corrective actions to prevent the error from even occurring. That's where you would probably get most value. But of course, like all of these things, it's not just the technology, it's the processes that you're using. And most relevant here is the people part of this. I think Welf mentioned that, the people part, or the human-centric factors, they contribute up to 80% of all failures on the shop floor. That the human interaction with the system, with the manufacturing equipment itself, that's potentially the problem. So we encourage our customers to have a view of this journey. Where are they today? What is their circumstance? And almost more importantly is, where do they want to get to? And if customers have a fairly good understanding of that journey, then where Tulip and some of the things we're talking about today, where they fit in, takes on a real clear relevance at that point. Okay, next slide, please. So for the medical device and diagnostics industry, this digital transformation journey, it can refer to a lot of different things, like IT modernization, moving to the cloud, or software as a service, putting services online, or just legacy system modernization. But at Seabrook, we call this connected manufacturing for MedTech 4.0. And for us, it means focusing on areas like the traditional MES, which is represented here in the bubble in the center, for things like integration of systems, analytics, the bubble on the left, visualizing the data. Of course, cloud is a central part of this, and IoT, where you have the connected components supporting all of this. And over on the right-hand side, manufacturing apps, which is the bit we're talking about today. We use this graphic to describe where we think manufacturers need to focus. Those bubbles represent those areas where we think they need to focus, and that digital journey is definitely touching on all of those things. And we, as I said, we use the graphic to kind of look at each of the bubbles in turn and say, there's technology, there's people, and there's process issues within each of those bubbles, and that's what we're here to kind of help them with. Today's webinar really is about describing, the human-centric part of that. How does this on the shop floor, at the manufacturing shop floor, how does this all fit in? Next slide, please, Welf. So what we'd like to do now is to, Welf has talked quite a bit about the technology and the industry. I've tried to give a little bit of a connection back to the business as to why this is important from a business perspective, and the need for that vision as to what is the business goals and how can the technologies that we're talking about help drive that business and even transform that business. But what I'd like to do now is talk for a moment or two about a very specific example. This is real. We're not going to use the customer specifics, but the project is real. It's actually ongoing, and the future is bright for the deployment of the technology at this site, or multiple sites actually. So I'll work through what the journey for this customer was and what aspects of the technology they used. It's a medical device manufacturer on the West Coast here in the US. Their circumstance was that they've had their current manufacturing with a CMO, and because, fortunately for them, with their business growth, they decided that they needed to take back in-house the manufacturing itself, and that they needed to significantly ramp up production. The device that they're talking about in this case, and we're talking about in this case, is a fairly sophisticated computerized medical device, an assembly with multiple sub-assemblies. The manufacturing of that, even in-house when they ramp it up, it still remains largely a manual process with the traditional kind of layout on the manufacturing shop floor of production lines and then workstations on those lines. However, they needed to make some choices about how they would monitor and control the shop floor, seeing as they were bringing it back in-house, and seeing as they were scaling it up significantly. There were some choices that had to be made. With the CMO, what's represented there on the left in that graphic is that they, would instruct the operator how to make the particular stage of the manufacturing process, what to do, how to do it, and so on. You can see the operator thumbing through paper. That's how the CMO managed the business as it was. But, that wasn't going to cut it. The customer wanted to manage their NPIs, the data that's associated with a new product introduction or the standard operating procedures. They wanted to track production, like work in progress, quality, of course, things like cycle time. And, to have an electronic device history record was core to this, because unless you can capture all of this information, it's difficult to, as Welf had said earlier, the industry has a lot of paper, and our customer definitely did not want to continue that as they ramped up production. So they wanted to go electronic. But even more probably pressing than that was the fact that they needed to do this quickly, because there was a market opportunity, and getting to the market, or time to value, as they would describe it, that was a completely compressed schedule. So that was a significant part as well what technology could they deploy that would drive their business as quick as possible. There's many choices for them to make, lots of manufacturing execution systems available, which would MESs, which would be the traditional sort of potentially the traditional way of doing this. You know, not only though did they not go with that kind of traditional software, but you know, they chose in the end to go with a Tulip solution. But not only to go with the Tulip solution, but they felt that that technology allowed them to control the deployment, control the integration themselves. So in-house, they wanted to drive this. They didn't want to farm it out. They wanted to make sure they understood the technology and drove it themselves. Ultimately, the project did comprise Tulip, Seabrook, and customer people, but the customer was driving this completely. So the apps that were created here were to guide the operator in their, you know, their daily shift, to give them instructions, like it shows on the graphic on the right-hand side, to do the assembly, give them those instructions electronically. Sometimes it was a little video clip of how to do what they needed to do, or a picture of the assembly stages. Excuse me, but it was work instructions that were given to them online, context sensitive to where they're at, and guiding them at every stage. And as they were being guided to do what they needed to do, they would also gather information about, you know, cycle times and the input of information. They were capturing information about sub-assembly part numbers and so on. So one of the major successes that they're beginning to see is that, you know, there's transaction errors. They're able to actually reduce those and in general decrease the cycle time from when the CMO was making this assembly to what they were now seeing on the shop floor as a reduction of about 20% in cycle time. It's equivalent to capacity increase, so very happy to see that. But one other thing that was a kind of a side note to this was when they saw that the adoption by the staff at the shop floor was so much more easy. The operators wanted to interact with the system. They wanted to follow it. They saw the relevance of it, in particular new operations. But the customer management also saw the potential for this. So in the hiring of their new people for the shop floor assembly, the manufacturing process, they quickly developed an app for a type of aptitude test for their people. So if you were a potential employee, part of the hiring process was they would ask you to spend a few minutes with the app, going through a sequence and being guided through the app by this Tulip, essentially to do a certain work task, and then they'd be monitored on that for time and for accuracy. And that was a data point to the hiring staff then as to how this candidate fitted that particular task or type of work. So that was something they thought of on the fly, developed, deployed, and was a great boost to them in terms of they feel in hiring people. So, you know, the contrast between trying to control everything with paper versus the flexibility this gave them, they felt was enormous. So yeah, it's still a work in progress. They're about to go live with this. So, you know, so far so good. Next slide, please. So what the customer, you know, what we're seeing here is what's potentially beyond the go live for the customer. What we're seeing really is that the work instructions part of this, like I described, you know, giving them video clips and pictures and drawings and PDFs and so on, whatever component of the step, whatever manufacturer step they're in at the minute, they're giving them the appropriate instructions in the appropriate media. So they're very happy with that, and the whole management of the paper that would have been the case heretofore, that has gone away. All of this work instruction material is in one master copy in the cloud, so it's version controlled. If there is a change that has to be made, it's made one place. It's immediately available to the instruction. The instructions are immediately, modified instructions are immediately available at the shop floor. So they're super happy about that. But, you know, They got the minimum they needed to go live in place, got their people trained, got operational. But what's now down the road is what you see here is a fairly typical workstation with a lot more sophistication that can be added. And our customer is actually talking about, you know, beyond go live, they will continue to add features and functions. The concept really is that they will perhaps work on a monthly sprint where some new feature and function will be added. And as they do that, they'll release it to the shop floor, continue to the next one. So a sprint delivering a feature and a function, and then the next one beyond that, and so on. And some of the things that they're considering, you know, material confirmations, using, they currently use barcode scanners and printers, but using more of them. So some sub-assemblies that come in already perhaps have a serial number on them. They're able to scan them into device history record. Automating the data collection part, they have some, but not a lot at the moment, but they will integrate Tulip with test rigs, for example, and other intelligent instruments that are on the workstation. And again, reduce errors, increase accuracy, make quality and performance attributes available at the workstation, like KPIs, so that the operator that's performing the operation can see how he's doing versus the gold plate standard, see how the shift is doing, or how the product, one product versus another is doing. So the sort of analytics will be developed with the tool set that's available within Tulip by the client themselves. So analytics that make sense for the operations folk at the shop floor, but also the executives. There's a whole area of apps available in Tulip for this type of data analytics. So these are some of the things that the client is looking to implement post go live, if you like. Next slide, please. But not just at the workstation level. You know, some of the things that the technology will allow them to do, of course, is you know, more SKUs will be deployed more quickly because it's electronic instructions that's been given to the operator. They don't have to talk about, you know, version control of paper. One big thing I guess I didn't touch on was that the customer has two locations, one predominantly a Spanish location and one predominantly an English location. By being able to have one master copy of the work instructions, because the same product is made in both locations, the app can be multilingual, and they can simply select the location they're at and get the work instruction in Spanish or in English. It's a tremendous step forward for them, again, for management of new product introductions and for management of the data that's given to the shop floor and collected by the shop floor. They're super happy about that. But, you know, one area here is mentioned the EDHR again, and just to touch on that, I mean, that's in this industry, in the medical device and diagnostics industry, that is the core of compliance, of quality, of production. And, you know, it's in the case here, it's actually the EDHR, you know, we gather information, but we actually show in real time the components that are being used. We show, you know, all of the interactions. That's a display table in the app to the operator so that they understand what's being required of them and so on. But, you know, lots of different application areas and lots of different potential for them as they go forward with the technology. And the triumphant of, you know, people, the Tulip expertise supporting them, Seabrook as an integrating company that have 30 years of experience, and the customer own vision, because they have that business transformation model. They understand where they are and where they're going to. They have a vision of 3 years' time, what their business will look like and how they'll be using this technology. That's definitely the key to success right there. Next slide, please. Thank you. And I think this is my last slide, but, you know, the whole ecosystem, I just wanted to kind of step away from the specific example for one moment and just talk about the ecosystem a little bit. It's applicable for this customer, but in general, this idea that there's apps that are available at the platform level when, you know, the project kicks off, the customer has available apps that are available because Tulip have, that's what you get to start with. The approach would be customers will build apps and app bundles, and they have a life cycle, they're put under version control, and they're available, of course, like in the example I just said, if there's multiple SKUs, or they have a reusability, a high reusability, because they're an entity onto themselves. And part of the vision for Seabrook is that we've 30 years of experience in the industry, and our vision is to embody our expertise around validation, around the manufacturing, into app bundles as well, and make those available to customers to drive this value and to drive this transformation. But the customer themselves can, bring those app bundles to life, validate them, and put them under version control, and then have them as a very high level of reusability is available for them to deploy in other locations with similar SKUs and so on. So, yeah, I think that's my last slide. Next slide, Welf, please. What we might do just for a moment is, Welf, if you want to, there's a couple of other potential customer use cases you might touch on real quick, and then maybe we'll open it for questions and answers.
Sure. Yeah, I think I see there's a couple of questions coming in here, actually, so I was gonna maybe just address those. So there's a question around Tulip and how, so basically Tulip can be used as a lightweight MES, or do you have customers that are using both Tulip apps and in an MES? And the answer to that question is yes. We do have customers that already often have an MES system in place. I see there's also a follow-up question here, whether Tulip can interact with CAMSTAR, and the answer again is yes. And I think John can talk a little bit about that here in a moment. But in general, speaking, many companies we work with, especially the big enterprise companies, right? The top tier ones, they often already have an MES system in place. And how does Tulip kind of fit into that ecosystem, right? So if you think about traditional MES systems, they're very, and some of you guys on the call here might have experience with that, but they're often very big implementations that take months to years. They can take millions of dollars, and then you're kind of locked in for 10 years, and it takes quite a bit of time to get that ROI, right? And a lot of these MES systems traditionally have been focusing on the kind of the main part of the process, the manufacturing part. And where we've seen where Tulip kind of complements those solutions really well is kind of in these other areas, kind of where there's still paper-based processes, right? That could be maybe in the quality area. It could be maybe in the beginning, like kind of like outside the typical end-to-end process, right? So essentially the Tulip is kind of augmenting that MES, right? Providing that nice kind of user interface, right? That flexible user interface, and then integrating to the MES system. And maybe John, if you want to talk specifically about CAMSTAR, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I think just building on what you've said, well, it's very much a case of, I think, horses for courses. The MES, of course, has a very specific place in the industry, and it pretty much always will. The augmenting MES for those very large implementations and highly regulated implementations, I think it's no accident really that we've ended up with these 2 or 3 partners. We have a very specific vision of how we think the industry can benefit from the combination of both. Certain customers will always need the MES. Others, startups and others, like you say, well, will benefit most from starting with a Tulip. But in general, we see bringing the technologies together to add value to what the customer does and taking cost out. We see a bright future doing that, frankly. Was there another question, Will? Well, if we can't hear you.
Sorry about that. There's another question here. What are some of the barriers to implementation? Any resistance from customers, teams to move away from paper? You want to take that one, John?
I would say not barriers for moving away from paper. I would say a race to move away from paper. It depends who you ask, I guess. But if you're involved in an investigation for a product recall or an investigation around some incident with a product in the market, and you're doing that through paper, where you literally have to bring paper, reams of paper to a room to investigate. When you see that there is an attainable alternative to that, that can take literally minutes and hours versus days and weeks, there is little enough resistance from that person to go paperless. So to me, it's not really a question of is there a barrier paper versus the electronic thing. It's just, and we can help with this, it's just a general adoption of this type of technology. There can always be a resistance because of the threat and the fear. What will it do for me? What will it mean for me as an employee? But you've heard Welf many times talk about making it human-centric. And the approach with this technology is to really, it's not seen as something that's coming in to replace the manufacturing worker. It's seen as actually giving the manufacturing worker superpowers, is the way I describe it. It's augmenting them, giving them more information, making them better able to do what they need to do. Do more with less. So
yeah, maybe just to add on to that, right? I mean, we do try to keep the barriers to entry low, right? And we do that. Now I'm talking specifically about Tulip, our platform, right? It's cloud-based, right? Which makes it much faster, easier to deploy, and it's a no code, right? That means without having to, you don't need to have software development experience in order to digitize your operation. It's very similar to PowerPoint, kind of drag and drop. So making it very easy for you. There's a question here in general about who to contact. If from a representative, feel free to contact either John or myself. We'll share the contact information as a follow-up here, and then we can connect you with representatives from our companies. And then there's another question here about, does Tulip allow for OE calculations? The answer is yes. So we do have we call it machine monitoring solution. So it's a tool that allows us to connect to packaging machines or other automated manufacturing lines, and we can then do things like calculate OE, to see how the machine or the tool is performing. Another question here is, what is the approximate time to value from implementation to ROI? Obviously, I mean, that depends on the scope of an implementation, but typically the way you implement Tulip, right? So if you think about Tulip is really a platform, right? So platform as a service, and it's a tool that allows you to solve specific problems on your shop floor. So the best way to achieve an ROI is to look at what are the problems that I have on my shop floor, and then pick the ones where you think that are low-hanging fruit, right? That could be, maybe we want better process visibility, so we're gonna implement a way to track, how many units are produced, or to track time. Or maybe we want, OE, right? So we connect to one of our lines. The typical, so it's really like it's solving these specific challenges, and you're doing that in a matter of days, not weeks or months, right? It's really this agile, rapid development, and you want to do, we call it a quick time to value, right? So get there as quick as possible. Don't wait 2 or 3 years to achieve an ROI.
And if you have any questions, somebody from Tulip and Seabrook will be reaching out to really connect with you guys. Yeah, thank you.